In 1989, Kevin Costner heard the ghost of shoeless Joe Jackson tell him, "If you build it, they will come." And every owner in baseball seems to have listened to old shoeless Joe, because virtually every baseball stadium in the country has been rebuilt since then. It is easier to count the stadiums that are still standing from 1989 than the ones that are not. I think there are still 6 left out of 30 baseball teams. The Yankees have been crying for a new stadium for years, but at least Yankee Stadium was considered the St. Patrick's Cathedral of baseball. By comparison, the Mets Shea Stadium was an old Department of Motor Vehicle. Ugly municipal building that served a purpose but that no one was happy to be in. Well, after 20 years, the Mets finally heard shoeless Joe Jackson themselves. And on April 3rd, their new ballpark was open for business, and boy did people come. They sold out a preseason game against the Red Sox on a rainy day in Queens. People crowded around the front gates 2 hours before game time to get their first glimpse at their new ballpark. Their new home. Fortunately, my buddy Dennis got me and him tickets for this once-in-a-lifetime event, and we soaked it up as only long-time suffering Met fans could. We were friends from high school through college, and then we went our separate ways, but after 20 years we became friends again through Facebook. And this was our reunion, which was much cooler than meeting at an old high school gymnasium in front of a bunch of stiffs. He got there before me to see the brick he and his brother bought in honor of their deceased father. The Mets offered fans a chance to buy commemorative bricks that they laid out in front of the entranceway to the new Jackie Robinson Rotunda. Some people put their names on the bricks, but others remembered loved ones who were big Met fans by putting their names down instead. I didn't see the brick. That was Dennis's special moment. Me, I was snapping pictures like crazy. I don't drive on the Whitestone Expressway much, so I had seen the stadium in about 7 months. I was more amazed by how fast they reconstructed the 7 trains entrance than the demolition of the old Shea Stadium, and then the finishing touches on Citifield. As we went through the cozy shack turnstiles, you could not help but feel like you were on hallowed ground. The Jackie Robinson Rotunda is like a museum with pictures and video screens everywhere, depicting Jack as both a player and a spokesperson for civil rights. Before there was Martin Luther King, the man in front of the civil rights issue was Jackie Robinson. His courage in college, then the Army, and finally baseball crashed down so many doors that had locked out black people before, and with a dignity and resolve few people could have mustered. It's fitting then that the front doors of City are devoted to him, since he helped the black man leave the servants' entrance and walk through the front door. People who have a problem with Jack being honored by the Mets, a team that didn't even exist when he retired, forget one thing. It was National League Baseball in New York City that opened its doors and its arms to the black player, and where the first black players became stars. The Mets are doing their absolute best to honor the tradition of the old Brooklyn Dodgers and New York Giants with their new ballpark, forming a bridge between the old and the new. And as we walked through its wide corridors, that bridge was self-evident in the structure of the building. The steel arch of Hell's Gate Bridge, which connects Queens with Ward Island, was the inspiration for the architecture of this ballpark. Steel girders are everywhere, reminiscent of the overhead portion of that bridge. But Dennis and I were less concerned about the architecture at that moment than finding and christening the new men's room. When we got in, myself and others had to take pictures with our phones because the toilets were like nothing we'd ever seen. They were environmentally sound, so you could call them green toilets. Odd-looking urinals with no handle to flush. In fact, they don't really flush, but just let gravity pull the waste down. Okay, next the Nathan hot dog stand, where there was a fixins bar in the middle of the walkway, complete with lettuce, tomato, hot sauerkraut, mustard, and ketchup. One typical New Yorker yelled out, "Hey, free salad!" This little bar might work well elsewhere, but I wonder how long before the Mets might dismantle it. We toured the whole lower level, learning about all the concession stands and other new features to this Citifield. There were elevators, lots of them. They were hidden at Shea Stadium. There was a full view of the field from any point of this walkway, which was way different from Shea. In fact, it was nice to just walk around this level and have the opportunity to enjoy the fine quality of food they were offering. At Shea, if you didn't have tickets for this section, you were blocked from even walking through it. Dennis said, "No more segregation." The hot dogs and burgers are made by one of the best in the city, Shake Shack. The barbecue by Blue Smoke. The Italian Heroes by Mamas of Corona. Other concessions I'm not even thinking of. At some of the very best of New York cooking, Right here at the ballpark and for very reasonable prices. A plate of ribs for $10. Not bad when you pay $6 for a hot dog. I don't mind paying $7.50 for a beer when it's high quality German beer like Stella Artois. We didn't blow a lot of money, but we soaked it all in. Then we headed out to the main concourse behind center field. That's where City will make more money than Shea ever dreamed of. This mini carnival has a miniature City Field called Citifield for wiffle ball games. It even had its own video scoreboard so the kids can watch themselves at bat. It will have a dunking booth and batting cage. It has tons of great concessions and picnic tables and a huge stadium store. 2 big beer stands with all the fancy beers and a video screen on the opposite side of the scoreboard so you can catch the game while you watch your kids have fun. If the game is boring or even a blowout, there's a little reason to leave the ballpark because entertainment is just a few hundred yards away. We sat in our seats, which were like 3 levels up between home plate and first base, and were amazed at how great the sight lines were. Apparently there is virtually not one bad seat in the house because all the seats are pointed towards home plate. They are 3 inches wider and have 6 more inches of legroom for the ever-growing New York butt. The scoreboards in center field cut out the last remaining view inside or outside the ballpark. No more looking at the junkyards. No more standing on the 7-train concourse peeking over the scoreboard and watching the game. And the wind appears to have been killed off by all the added blockades. That'll make a huge difference on those cold, damp, and windy nights. I love the use of orange numbers on the black outfield walls. That was a tribute to the New York Giants and the Polo Grounds. The outfield is not at all symmetrical. In fact, it has 9 different distances and walls that climb high and low. The orange trim signifying a home run reminds you of the old Astrodome. There is a Pepsi pavilion in the upper deck in right field that hangs out 8 feet over the field. What should be a fly ball out will be a home run up there, a la the old Tiger Stadium. Everywhere you look, you see an homage to an old ballpark. The edifice of Ebbets Field, the dugouts at Fenway Park, the brick wall behind home plate of Wrigley Field, and probably many more I'm not thinking of. The people who made Shea were thinking about a World's Fair, but the people who built Citi Field were obviously lovers of baseball. You feel like you're transported back in time and then forward again. It's 1912 with the lack of playing space beyond the foul lines, and then it's 2009 with the high-definition video scoreboard and huge home run apple in center field. Dennis said you don't even feel like you're in New York. You feel like you're in another state. I knew exactly what he meant. When I went to Philadelphia for the first time 5 years ago, I entered their new Citizens Bank ballpark, and for the first time I fell in love with a building. I said to my friend Mark at the time that if the Mets ever built a new ballpark, I would hope they would copy this, and they did, but better. Way better. I haven't even seen half the ballpark. I'm saving that up for my next trip there, but I hear it's just as amazing. Okay, there are a few quibbles. The lighting is an issue. While it's bright as daylight in the stands, apparently it's playing hell with the outfielders because it's intermittent. Instead of a steady flow around the rim of the ballpark, it has a bank of lights about 30 feet wide and then nothing for 200 feet, and then another bank. The fielders must be losing the balls in the shadows in between. And while they are very conscious of the past and the older New York squads, there is very little to remind you that this is indeed the Mets ballpark. The seats are Polo Grounds green. No offense, but I love the colors orange and blue. It's the first thing that made me love the team as an 8-year-old. But these are cosmetic quibbles that can be changed easily if they have enough complaints. But the prices are pretty reasonable considering the Mets have to pay for this place themselves. And even if the team are miserable losers, which it has a tendency to become every half-decade or so, at least we will have a beautiful place to hang out and wallow in our miseries together. It makes you realize how Boston and Chicago kept having sellouts even when their team stunk. When you have such a beautiful place to see a ball game, the ball game can be secondary. I hope for the Mets' sake that doesn't become an issue. Sports Illustrated picked them to win the World Series this year, but the new ballpark is already a winner. Let's go Mets from the Freditor.